It's really loud.
Hello and welcome to Dateline New Haven on WNHH FM, your home for community radio. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make New Haven and Connecticut tick. The sister act of Themis and Nicole Klarides are making Connecticut tick up at the state capitol. They're the first ever sister duo to serve in the State House of Representatives. Themis has been there 2 decades and is the chamber's leading Republican. Might even be the House Speaker, depending on the fall elections. And Nicole is finishing her first term. Be here in the WNHH studio to tell us what it's been like finding themselves spending their days back together in the same place, decades after they left home. What it's like to be siblings, making laws for the state. Welcome, and thanks so much for coming in, folks. Welcome back, Themis and Nicole. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. It's always great to be here. I know that you usually tape midday, which is difficult because we've been in session nonstop. So I'm glad to finally be here and see you again.
Yep, I am too, and I thank you for making time. And thanks to New Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. So, Nicole, you beat an incumbent, a Democratic incumbent.
Yes,
to
I
win
did.
your seat, Teresa Conroy, the 105th State House District, and Seymour. You cover Seymour and parts of Derby and Beacon Falls. And Themis, you've been 20 years covering Woodbridge, Orange, and Derby. So tell me, what was it like to be sisters in your first term? You now finished two sessions in your first term. What did you think it was going to be like? What did it end up being like to have a sister there in the chamber with you?
Well, first, let me say that I spent several years trying to convince her to run, and she absolutely, positively did not want to do it. So, of course, I gave up on that, trying to be respectful of what she was actually interested in doing.
So, in other words, she wouldn't run if you wanted her to, but it sounds like a younger sister. Yeah.
Exactly. And then about a year later, at 9 o'clock at night, I got a text saying, I'm going to run. So I go, for what?
You were hurt.
And I actually text her colleague on the Board of Selectmen in Seymour, the first selectman, and who I know you've had on the show.
Kurt Miller, yeah.
And I said, do you know what she's talking about? He goes, no, I got the same text. So that's what she decided. So I told everybody in the legislature, if you want her to do something, just have me tell her to not do it.
Well, without revealing much private information, I will tell you that I have 2 daughters as well who are the exact same age spread. They're in their mid-20s. And the older one was often trying to get the younger one to do what she did. And the younger one wasn't crazy about that. So little pop psychology here, Nicole. Would you have been interested earlier on if your big sister wasn't trying to get you to run for state rep?
Probably not. It was seeing her going through the process and making a difference in our town, originally in Seymour, when she was on the Board of Finance and then the state of Connecticut. That gave me that little bit of push to really get involved.
But you've been involved in politics already. You were a select woman they call them that in Seymour?
Yes, I was deputy first selectman in the town of Seymour for 6 years.
And but by trade, Themis, you're an attorney, correct?
Correct.
And Nicole, you are you work in healthcare. You work with players on sports teams.
I'm an athletic trainer.
Athletic trainer, and didn't you have another job too, or no?
Well, I help run our family business.
That's right. And the family business, Klarides, is obviously a big name in the Valley in Seymour because they have the big supermarket chain, right? I remember seeing that for decades.
Yes.
And you grew up around that, so you didn't really grow up in politics, did you, or did you?
Well, our family was always involved in public service, whether giving back to the community, and that's what our parents always instilled in us, just giving back to a community that has given so much to you and to us. So that's where we started.
Well, that's I don't know if that's still true in America, but it used to be that the big companies in town, the people who ran big companies, had felt an obligation to play a big civic role. That didn't always mean running for office. As you said, it could be like the big, funding the big charities in town. Although it sometimes did, and they tend to be Republican. I'm thinking of Colonel Isaac Ullman in New Haven, who had the garment factory through the 1800s and 1900s, kind of ran the Republican Party. Did the Klarides get involved in partisan politics when you were growing up?
No, I mean, I don't think we ever really talked about politics at the dinner table. We never had those conversations. And I knew that my parents were Republican, although it's funny because my mom grew up in West Haven, our mom, and she was a Democrat, but she didn't really know why. And so when she married my dad's family was Republican, and she just switched parties, but she really couldn't tell you why. So it wasn't a big topic of conversation in our family. But what we did know is, because my family, like our grandfather came over from Greece when he was in his teens, and he and his brothers started a little market and an ice cream parlor. And as families often do, they were fighting. and they decided to split the business up.
Oh, wow.
And for some reason, they both fought over the ice cream parlor.
Even though the money was in the
I don't think they realized that at the time, but
That's so
our
funny.
grandfather lost out and got the market, which is certainly
The rest
proved
is
to
history.
have turned out pretty well for everybody involved. But he started that, and then my dad and our uncles got involved in it and worked in it and built it up to what it is now.
Was it based in Seymour?
Yes, based in Seymour, and then we knew that you, as Nicole mentioned, you have to give back. And that was never in public service running for office, although that was not off the table. But they always made sure that they donated to, every fireman's event, every police event, every school event, anything that the community needed, as they still do now. And so we kind of grew up knowing you have to give back somehow. Whatever way that is for you is fine. But it there's not any right or wrong way, which is what I try and tell kids now. We chose to do this, and I sit on a lot of nonprofit boards. When you talk about Yale New Haven, I've sat on the Griffin Hospital board for over 10 years. I've been very involved with Yale New Haven, and Marna Borgstrom does a wonderful job there. However, whatever it is that you have a passion for, you get involved with, because that's what will make a difference if you have a passion for it.
And what did it mean to be a Republican? You growing up in the 60s and 70s, correct? Well, you're like
let's
shaking
not
your
be
70s.
crazy.
I think you're like 5
More
years.
70s.
More 70s,
and
okay.
60s.
And what did it mean to be Republican? Because in the old days, right, the Republicans were the business party, the bigger business party. So the Klarides were, even though they were second-generation immigrant, your parents, and they were, sort of started small, they'd become sort of business pillars. And that's sort of what Republicans used to be. What did it mean to be a Republican, you growing up? What ideas were behind that? What interests?
Well, I'll tell you what it meant to us. I mean, I can only speak for our family. As I mentioned, it started out with our grandfather opening a small market. Our father and our uncles built that into 2 supermarkets and real estate. And that was several hundred employees. But I will say this, and this is what kind of makes me sad when we deal with a lot of the issues we deal with in the legislature now. Our business was not union, but our employees would never have chosen that option because they were treated fairly. They were treated respectfully. They had wonderful benefits and profit sharing and health care, et cetera. And so when you talk about what does Republican mean, is that, the business, et cetera. I mean, we're not talking about the GEs of the world, right? We're talking about small business drives this economy and every economy in this great country. And it's, I think, 70 to 80% of the economy, businesses with under 10 employees. So we grew up understanding that kind of thing. And we were Republican because we believed in working hard and doing as best as you can, but treating your employees fairly.
I was reminiscing with Nicole before you came that I remember the big specialty wire plant, which was right past Route 8 there. I remember doing some stories in the 80s where they're trying to save it when the owners and the union combined to try to do employee stock ownership plan, but that didn't last very long. But now it's been reborn. But there was that bar right by the gate where each shift, like everyone would be drinking right after.
That was
but in
before
those
our time,
days,
Paul.
yeah, but in those days, sort of blue collar workers were not, for the most part, Republicans, right? I don't know what all the politics were of the Valley, but it would seem like there's been a shift in who Republicans are, right? You've been watching this, and you two have been part of that, right? I mean, Nicole, you overturned a Democrat in the neighboring towns, and how have you watched that happen? I'm thinking of the Trump vote was strong in the Valley, and he got a lot of people who used to be Democrats. I'm guessing like your mother, and I'm guessing like the people who used to work at that plant. Why has that happened, and what have you seen happen, Nicole?
Well, I think what you see is people, even going back to when our parents had the supermarket and our uncles, it's the working class people. We're people that are working hard, working towards the American dream, and want to live a happy life. But
people always felt that way, but they used to vote Democratic.
Right,
why did they switch?
Because now I think the Republican Party is the party of people, of the working class American
How did that
people.
happen, and what made that happen? Was it anger over trade deals? Was it more cultural thinking that like snobby coastal elites look their eyes at them, people who have more college education, or they feel burned by government not serving their interest? What do you see at the heart of that?
I mean, it could be a combination of everything and all the above. But I think when it comes down to it, the Republicans now are working class people that want to save their money and keep more money in their pocket at the end of the day. And that's what we keep working on every day and every year as Republicans here in Connecticut.
You know, I think it's been a pendulum, right? So, and what I mean is, I understand many years ago, before any of us were born, you had business and you had workers.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and that's the whole reason unions started in the first place, was to protect workers who weren't being treated fairly by the big bad business
Right, people
owners.
worked anywhere but Klarides.
Anywhere for there, right? That weren't being protected, and so I agree with that. You know, and that part of history, I agree with that, because they weren't being treated fairly. They should have the right to defend themselves and to have protections. The problem is that a lot of that has shifted. That pendulum has moved all the way to the other side. So I think.
Wait, are you saying unions have too much power, or unions only help them? I mean, one critique is union leaders didn't help themselves at the expense of their membership. But you can't say unions have more power outside of government, because the percentage of the workforce in America that's now unionized is under 10%. But in the realm you deal with, in government, unions still have a lot of power in places like Connecticut.
We're talking about two different, we're talking about public sector and private sector unions.
Right.
I agree. And so we are just discussing public sector unions now. And I'm also differentiating between the union leadership and the rank and file, because I do not think that for the most part, the union leadership is really taking into account what the rank and file needs and negotiating on their behalf.
And the Republicans have succeeded, I believe, in convincing a lot of working class people that government is them rather than us, and that they are also taxpayers, not just workers. So their wages might come at the expense of the I don't know.
I agree with you, and part of the and I said this last session several times publicly, that of the 40 some odd thousand state employee union workers in this state, they are part of the 3.5 billion state citizens.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they are part of a bigger group. So you're arguing about what you want to keep and give up in a smaller group, but you are hurting yourself in the bigger group, because you are not going to, one day you're going to go to the mailbox and you're going to see no health care and no pension. And that is the last thing we want to happen. We want people that have been promised something and have relied on something. They should not have the rug pulled out from under them. That is not what this is about. But when the governor negotiated this contract last year and extended this contract to 2027, I mean, the best way I can describe it is, anybody that's watching and listening, if you have over half of your budget that you cannot touch for the next 10 years, what do you think is going to happen to the other half of your budget?
And the other argument on the side, obviously, we don't have to go deep into this, is that
Fine.
A lot of people felt the way you did. And then on the other side, they felt like they actually got a lot of concessions. There were contractual limits on what they could have gotten anyway. And a lot of the Democrats argue that in the long run, they got a better deal than they would have. And you guys are arguing they actually closed the door on getting the deal that needs to happen over the long-term fairway.
Just to clarify that, I mean, I think that on a big level, that's partially true. The problem is this. Did we get savings from that negotiation? Yes. Did we get anywhere near the savings we needed to? No. And when you look at the things that are still remaining in that contract, and you compare that to the private sector, where you've extended this contract to 27, there is a 3-year no layoff guarantee. I would like just somebody that listens to your show to tell me that they have a guaranteed no layoff. They are guaranteed paid increases after the first 2 years. I would like somebody else to tell me that too, unless they have a long-term employment contract. Their defined benefit plan continues. They're still paying 0 for health plan deductibles. And remember, we are on the state plan too. So, I understand I would lose benefits too. But these are not reasonable things. When you go for your WellCare visit, there's 0 deductible. Who doesn't pay a deductible besides that group of people?
All right, you're listening to Themis and Nicole, Klarides, sisters, and I will quickly, after we have one more question, get back to why they're here to talk about being sisters in the legislature. But we're talking about, in the meantime, how places like the Valley became more Republican when they were Democratic in their youth, in these women's youth. And you're listening to them on Dateline New Haven on WNHH FM 103.5 FM, live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. Brenda Kupchik gives you a thumbs up, as does John Lombardi. Vinny Carfo says 2 absolutely wonderful women. Okay, so you guys are ranking pretty well in Vinny's book.
Great man.
Thank you, Vinny.
Thank you.
Mark Medevieres is weighing in on directed by George Soros, spooky dude. That always gives me a little creeps as a Jew, because I don't like that whole Soros thing. Shadow Party Democrats clinch the apparitional voting blocks consistently. This phantasmic irregularity raises the ominous, sinister specter of electoral fraud. Who are we going to call? Ghostbuster Trump will thump the sneaky Soros.
Mark is a deep thinker.
Okay. Speak of deep thinkers, so what did you expect being two sisters at the legislature for the first time? Your older sister, as I guess earlier in life, had been there before you. Now you were kind of going in her footsteps. What did that feel like, Nicole, and what did it end up being like based on what you expected?
Well, people ask me this question all the time, and they say, is it everything you thought it would be? And going into it, I thought I had a pretty, eyes wide open view because Themis had been in for 18 years at that point. And really, for as much as I knew, there was almost as much that I didn't know. And what's great about our caucus is there's every person you could go for help or question about anything at any time.
And the meetings are run by your sister, right?
Caucuses, yeah.
Yeah, the caucus.
So what's it like to sit in the room while your sister's up there laying down the law, and does she ever chew you out?
She doesn't. I mean, sometimes we've been known to have an argument here and there across the floor or throw digs, because at the end of the day, we're still sisters. We don't agree on everything. We never have, and we never will. So we have our differences, but we always manage to.
Was it intimidating for you to go up there? That building is almost like a cross between like Disneyland and the Royal Palace. I always walk in that building. I always feel like I've entered. Yeah,
right.
Well, that's how everyone behaves. But I mean, the physical building with the gilded details and the big ceilings and all that marble. I walk in there sometimes. I catch my breath for a second. Feel like walking in some kind of fantasy world, and to go in there and to see that your sister had already been there 20 years and she's sort of the most powerful person in the room and laying down the law. Was that intimidating for you? Is that something you had to get used to?
It wasn't intimidating. I mean, I see what she's done and her position, and it makes me proud. And to add to that, it's an exciting experience. It's like going from grammar school to middle school to high school and college.
Which you did 3 years behind. So you were a freshman in high school in Seymour when she was a senior. And what was that like? I read one interview where apparently she told the boys to stop calling you or something, and she was a little more bookish, and you were more social.
Yeah, more social. And we played tennis together, and the big joke was, oh, Themis and Nicole are playing a doubles match today. Let's go watch them bicker. And
so you did used to bicker. I mean, a lot of sisters have to work that out.
We played, competitive tennis. I mean, we were ranked 4th in the state in doubles, and we would fight without fail during every match.
What would you fight about?
It doesn't even matter, right? It's just, you didn't do this right, I didn't do that right. I don't like what you did here. Don't look at me sideways. I mean, they're sisters, right? Your 2 daughters,
right? It could be something not even tennis related. We could have brought something up from dinner the night before, or she said something to someone, or looked at me funny.
But did you look up to your sister as being older and being successful?
Yes, always looked up to her. Even though, like I said, even though we had our differences in bicker, I always looked up to her. Very proud of what she's done.
Sarah Maloney and Mort Conley give thumbs up, and Nancy Griswold is urging people to vote Republican.
Sarah Maloney, yay!
So now, what
she keeps me under control?
Yes, she does.
So, can you tell me a moment early on in the session where you either learned something for your sister, or it was a moment where you had to figure out how you were going to relate to each other? Anything stick out in your mind, like on a particular bill or a particular meeting?
Well, I guess during the first session, there were some bills that were very important to me that I was working on. And
Which ones were those?
It was a scope of practice bill. As you know, I'm an athletic trainer, and we've been trying many years to update our scope of practice. And this was something that I was very passionate about. I wanted to get.
What is a scope of practice?
Just what athletic trainers can do as far as our education and in the field. In our field. Meaning
what degrees you have to have, or what kind of work you can do that you're allowed to do?
What you're allowed to do.
Does that mean like help someone sprained ankle or administer medication?
Yes, and we wanted to expand that to be comparable to what our education was, because our education was allowing us to do more, but the laws in the state of Connecticut were not.
So what would be an example? Give a pill or a brace?
No, it's not just ankle taping. It's rehabbing athletes, and right now we were only able to work with athletes. Meaning people that, kids, student athletes that practiced 3 days a week, every week. Now we expanded it to we can work with an athletic population.
What does that mean?
Meaning someone that's not just strictly an athlete. We can work in a wellness center. We can rehab people with a doctor's orders to rehab.
And is that if you have a certain degree or license?
Yes, you have to have an athletic training degree and a license.
So now I didn't see much coverage of that. That's something you got passed this term?
Yes, what I was saying was Themis said, listen, if this is something that's passionate to you, you need to go out there and work
In other words, your sister wasn't going to leave the room and say, my sister
you
wants
have to
this
do
bill,
this.
so everyone line up.
No, she said, you go talk to people and you let them know why this is important to you and you get them to vote for this. And that's exactly what I did.
So how did you do it? Like, did you take people to coffee? Did you wait to certain moments in the hallway? Did you find out something they wanted that you trade?
Did you beat their faces in?
Yeah, no beating. Didn't have to happen. Just I went up to all my fellow legislators on both sides of the aisle and explained to them why this was important and why we needed this to happen. And also my fellow athletic trainers were up there every day talking to legislators and senators, letting them know why this is important.
Mm-hmm. And Themis, how about in your perspective? You must have been aware. How many people are in your caucus?
71.
So you had to be aware that the other 69 were aware that your sister was there.
Very aware.
Did you think about that, and how did you deal with
A
that
lot.
to make sure it wasn't favoritism or?
Listen, anybody that has been a member of the House Republican Caucus when I was deputy leader or as leader now will tell you that I go to the mat for every member. I will fight for them. I will. It's a family. We call ourselves a family. We're not colleagues, and it's one of those things where I can say whatever I want about you to your face, but nobody else says anything about you.
Right.
Because
were you that way as sisters too? Like beat the crap out of each other and then go to school
I'm like
and then
that
nobody
now.
mess with me? Yeah.
Exactly. So we're like that in our caucus. So I go to the mat for every member and any issue they have, and never, ever, ever will anybody in that caucus under my watch be disrespected. And I have proven that day after day.
So what about with your sister?
So
did she have to prove herself a little extra?
I will not treat her any differently. I will protect her just as much. But she has to make sure that she knows how to advocate for herself and advocate for her bills. And I will help her like I'll help anybody else. But I just wanted to make sure that it was never considered favoritism on my part.
And can you think of it a moment where you had to show that? Was there a key moment? I like Nicole's story where you told her she had to go out and round up the support. You weren't going to do that for her. Not that she was asking you to, but like that was the lesson. And can you think of any awkward moment or a moment of truth where you kind of had to put that into practice and show people?
No, I mean, there were days in these bills she's talking about where every day, are they going to call the bill today? Are they going to? I don't know. I mean, first of all, I'm dealing with a $5 billion deficit. I'm trying to get a budget passed. Nobody's letting us call our budget. I mean, there's a few other things on my mind at the time. And finally, I'm like, I don't care. Okay, I don't care. I will do whatever I can to get it called, but I can't deal with it right now. I said, go talk to the speaker. She's like, I don't want to talk to him. Nicole, I can't do it right now. So I advocated and
this was at the end of the session
vehemently
where a
for
lot of things
her
die on the vine.
as I did anybody else. But at a certain point, I have to prioritize too. She sits in the back row and I sit kind of in the middle, and I would get a text. Are they going to call the bill today? I don't know.
So then I would go down the line to her deputies.
Right.
Themis is busy. Are they going to call the bill? Themis is busy. Are they going to call the bill? So I had to go to everybody and anybody that I could to advocate for myself.
But remember this. That is not any different than the rest of my colleagues in the House.
Right.
Every day, they're going to call our bill today. Are they going to call our bill today? So she's not any different than anybody else.
So, Nicole, were you surprised that your sister wasn't at least going to give you a little 911 there?
No, not at all.
Or I mean 411, excuse me.
Yeah, I know what you meant. But no, it is, but it's funny. Some of our fellow legislators think that they could get to Themis through me.
That was interesting. I didn't think that was going to happen.
So, like, Nicole, do you think you could mention to Themis about ...
Give me one example. Give me an example.
I mean, just
without a name.
Can Themis call me back?
And was this your own Republican legislators? Was it Democrats? Was it
it could be both sides. Yeah, exactly.
And
I'll do my best. I had the same issue, and it's a funny story with First Selectman Kurt Miller. Never returns phone calls. Yes, love him, but people call me, Nicole, can you get Kurt to call me back? Sure, no problem.
And but what did you say in these situations?
I said, what do you need?
Depend on if you like the person or not, right?
Yeah.
No, but did you help them get to your sister?
Yes, I would just.
That's why I said depend on if she liked them or not.
I would gently remind her, so and so is trying to get in touch with you.
All right, so you were sort of aligned up to your sister.
Yeah, a little bit.
And I also noticed that there are people in the caucus that may not be the most liked people, but who I would see buddying up to her, and I would lean over to one of my deputies or people that had been there longer. I go, do you notice who's buddying up to Nicole? I'm not going to like him anymore. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. And Nicole, what was that bill that you got passed about the trainers?
It was the athletic trainer scope bill, House Bill 7171.
And it did pass both houses. Was it at the end of the session?
Yes, it did. It was on the last night. I believe they both passed on consent calendar in the House and Senate.
And how did it get on? Was it your sister who got it on? Was it the House Speaker? Given that your sister said, leave me alone, I got some more important stuff to look at. Go do your own bill.
I think it was the caucus as a whole.
The same way, listen.
It was important to everybody at the end of the day.
We negotiate bills, right? And so whether Nicole has a bill, or Vin Candelora has a bill, or Brenda Kupchik has a bill, or J.P. Straczynski has a bill, whoever has, they give them, I need this bill, I need that bill, and they're on this paper all session long, and we try and get them called as quickly as we can. And then the last couple days when we do a lot of bills at once, it's my job and our deputy's job to advocate for all of our members' bills and try and get as many of them through.
Nicole, can you think of another moment when you watched how your sister operates to learn how to be a legislator, how she talked to a colleague, how she made a decision, how she pushed the bill she was interested in, how she resolved a dispute? Watching her firsthand, can you think of a moment when you picked up something you didn't know before?
How do I talk to people and how do I dissolve her?
She's a problem solver. We all are. Well, it's what she does every day. It's when she's speaking to, whether it's a constituent or a member of our caucus or the other side of the aisle or a lobbyist. It's just you.
Can you think of a moment or you saw her do something successfully that might not have been a big deal, just getting the gears of government going?
The budget. I mean, the budget was a big deal. Both years. These first 2 years.
To be, yeah.
Right, and she's, you could go as far back as her, grow a set of balls comment, and that was one of her.
What was that one again?
Grow a set.
And who was that to?
Everybody.
There
was the state treasurer has a conference every year, and she invites all the mayors and first selectmen, and then many private sector people. So last year, I was invited to be on the panel. So it was the speaker, myself, and Ben Barnes, the governor's budget director, and Christine Stewart was the moderator. So when we arrived,
my favorite reporter up there.
She's great. Love Christine. When we arrived, it was at Rentschler Field. So as most people know, that's where UConn plays. And when we got there, they had a big box of stress balls that were baseballs, basketballs, and footballs. And they were giving away. So I grabbed 2 baseballs because I'm a big baseball fan and just threw them in my bag because they were cute and they were giving them away. So we get through all the beginning and we start on this panel. And Christine's asking the questions. We're going back and forth. And at first, and I was in the middle. So Secretary Barnes said, part of the problem we have in this state is that we borrow too much. And I said, you know what, Ben, I couldn't agree with you more, but under your boss's watch, we've had the highest borrowing that we've had in the history of the state of Connecticut. And he said, that's not true. I go, it actually is true. He's like, well, it's not true. I said, it's true. It's just one of those black and white things.
Were you arguing over present value of money? Like, was it most
absolute
dollars?
Number that we bond? The highest they went.
But I mean, is that adjusted for the real value of the money over time? Okay.
But I mean, when Governor Malloy took over, I think we were, it was 1.2 billion, and he got up to 2.8 billion. Because where did you get? I'd like to see the numbers. I go, Ben, they're your numbers. You gave them to us. So that got me all fired up, which doesn't take much to get me fired up, but that certainly did. So a couple questions go on, and then the speaker was answering a question, and his response was the following. We've put together 6 years of austerity budgets. Now, we all know the word austerity means lean and responsible and fiscally, prudent. And
in Portugal, they're not saying it's responsible.
Got myself so worked up that I grabbed the balls in my bag and put them under my leg. And I said, here's the problem. Here is the difference between Republicans.
Under your leg?
I stored them under, because they were stress balls.
Okay, so you did that to get rid of the stress.
Because now
a squirrel with
with the nuts.
With the nuts.
I said, here is the difference between Republicans and Democrats in the Connecticut legislature. I get along with the speaker. He's a nice enough guy. We have different visions for the state of Connecticut. And here's the difference. He believes that the 2 highest tax increases in the state's history, the highest borrowing in the state's history, the most regulation we've ever seen, and every anti-business bill known to man that we have passed, that they have passed in the past 6 years, are austerity budgets. I do not. The problem in this state is people have to start getting stronger, doing fiscally responsible budgets, not being afraid of the next election, and we need to, and I grabbed the balls, and I said, we need to grow a set of these. And I held them up in front of hundreds of people. So, it was the headline all over the place. And it just became, everybody says it now. We need to grow a set. So that's...
And what did you think about that, Nicole?
I thought it was great. I mean, it said exactly what she needed to say. And it
is that your style, too? I mean, Themis does say a lot of things about kind of getting into it with people. Do you have a different style or?
No, it's similar. You know, we really both say we just speak the truth. We're honest people. We're not going to sugarcoat something. If it's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's bad.
All right, you're listening to Nicole and Themis Claride, the sister act in the legislature, the Connecticut State House of Representatives, and they're on Dateline New Haven, WNHH New Haven's home for community radio, 103.5 FM, live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. Now, you're the first in the history of the State House. I saw that stated. But has there ever been a sister team in the state Senate? Have other states have a sister team?
No,
have you researched this?
I haven't researched other states, but there hasn't been in the state Senate. I mean, there's barely women in the state Senate, so the chances that there are two women that are sisters was highly unlikely. There were two brothers in the state house, actually, at one point, but
Larson?
never two sisters. No, Ritters.
Oh, that's right. That's right. And a father. Jesus, that's a family dynasty.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. John Lombardo says, a pair of great leaders. You're both wonderful, delivering an awesome message. Patricia Eos Fabrizio, I'm sorry if I butchered your name. Thumbs up. Nancy Griswold said, Themis, I was hoping you would run for governor. Why didn't you run for governor?
Well,
you know, I do think, I
do
honestly, without saying I agree or disagree with you, you probably would have been pretty far ahead at this point.
Well, that's very nice of you to say. I'll tell you very simply.
No, it's a pretty weak field, Themis.
Well, I didn't want to say I didn't say it. I'll tell you.
And also, you're the woman. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I'll tell you very simply why. I tortured myself and everybody around me, as Nicole and anybody who's in my company can tell you, for almost a year. I wanted to do it. It was something I thought I would be good at, although it's a very difficult time for anybody to do this. Here's the reason I didn't. I have lived this for 20 years. I have spent the last 2 years with the Senate being tied and the House being 4 votes difference. I have seen what we have stopped. I have seen what we have made happen, and that is still technically in the minority. If we have a Republican governor and we do not have a Republican-controlled House and Senate, unfortunately, that Republican governor will have his hands tied. And so everybody else's decision was, should I run for governor or not run for governor? My decision was, should I run for governor or try and stay in the House and get the majority? And as much as I would like to have a Republican House and Senate and Republican governor, I strongly believe that a Republican legislature is more important at this point in time. And that's why I made the decision.
When Unite Here Union took over the Board of Alders, which is our legislator, that ran the agenda for the city. Sometimes people, I guess, governor gets the limelight in this incredibly important position. You appoint a lot of stuff outright, so you have a lot of impact, and you have rescission authority and all that. But people sometimes underestimate the value of legislatures. Do you think that's because you don't get as much ego gratification being one of many in a group as opposed to being the governor?
Well, I mean, certainly the governor's the governor, as you said. But I think it depends on who the leaders are, what kind of attention they get, what kind of personality they have. And I will tell you this, that a governor, as you know, constitutionally can do whatever he wants to do, but it cannot happen unless a legislature agrees with it. So every one of my Democrat colleagues who goes out there and complains about Governor Malloy and all the bad things he's done have nobody to blame but themselves, because they could have stopped him and they didn't. And that's what people really need to understand. A governor is wonderful.
But did you feel you would have as much impact or even more, given that you've been in the legislature 20 years? So if you help the Republicans get in leadership, you can actually make more things happen as a House Speaker?
Like I'll say it again. There is nothing more important in state government than a legislature.
And does it look like, I mean, what I'm hearing is that there's a good chance Republicans will win governor. Senate's anybody's for the taking. It's already tied. But the House is maybe looking like that's going to stay Democratic. Is that what you're hearing?
I have never heard that.
Okay.
Actually, I've actually heard that people think that there's more of a chance the House is going to take the majority than the Senate.
Oh, the Senate. Okay.
But listen, I hope we both do, and I'll do whatever we can to get us both in the majority.
And you would be the Speaker, presumably.
Well, you know, if people wanted me to be,
and
I would
Maura
hope.
Lyons, I remember being the Speaker as a Democrat.
Are you going to vote for me?
I don't know. What are you going to get?
What is she going to give you? What do you want from her next time to get her vote?
Nothing.
Oh my goodness! Not even like another training bill. No. Okay.
We'll see.
Okay, but what Maura Lyons was from Stanford, was a female head of this Speaker.
She was the first woman Speaker.
Has there been one since?
No, and there's never been a female Republican Speaker.
So you'd be the first female Republican.
I mean, I'm the first female Republican leader.
And what is that? Does that matter to you? Does it have any impact? Do women operate differently?
I spoke at an event yesterday in New York, and I said, listen, I don't want to be known as a great or a good woman leader. I want to be known as a good leader. I'm proud to be the first woman leader. I think the face of the party, which I get to be as leader in the House, is something that's important, because let's be honest, an all-white guy is a Republican standing there saying, you know, we support women, we support minorities, we support younger people, doesn't have the same impact as a woman doing it. It just doesn't.
Not
It's
like
a visual.
Nikki Haley, is she a model for you?
I like her. I think she's doing a great job. I like her a lot. I think she's feisty.
She was a very effective governor.
Yeah, and I think she's feisty, and I think she doesn't take a lot of crap from people. And I like her. I like the job she's done.
Is it killing you watching the two parties candidates for governor, and they're all they're not losers, but
killing me.
I mean, am I wrong in not seeing any inspiration on any side? I mean, there's some fire in Tim Herbst if you're a Trump person, which isn't going to play well in the general, but
Right. I will say this. I know all the candidates on both sides. I think they all certainly have their skill set, but I believe this now even more than I ever have. You can be the smartest person in the world. You can have the best biography. You can go to the best schools in the world. You can make a bazillion dollars, but people have to connect with you. That doesn't make people connect.
Well, Boughton connects, doesn't he?
But when you talk to people, here's the thing. There's connecting and then there's excitement, right?
Inspiring, yeah.
People walk out of a room, they have to feel like, oh, jeez. I haven't had a lot of hope before, but now I feel like he or she gave me that.
Roland had that ability.
That's the difference.
I think Roland had that ability.
I agree.
El Grasso, Obama, Trump. So
yeah,
you see none of that on either side.
No, I'm not saying I do or I don't. I'm saying I think that's probably what's lacking.
I think you.
No, listen. There's anybody that supports any one of those candidates feels something.
Yeah.
Right. So
but I know what you mean. I'm hearing a lot of that. Joe Ganim is the only Democrat in that pack who connected with people, but most people felt like he wasn't going to be the candidate because he couldn't win given the felony background.
Well, I will say this: of all the other day we had a leaders meeting up at the Capitol, and we were talking about everybody's ads. And
some of those are fun. I like the Stemmerman Stefanowski.
Well, I think that Ganim's ad is probably the best ad. And you want to know why, though?
That was a great ad.
But there's a very simple reason why, and it all goes to what I just said. It's the only real one.
Yeah.
Not the only real one, but listen, he did what he did. He went to jail. He served his time.
Are you talking about the boxing one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was an effective ad.
He came out and he owns it, right? He owns what he did, and he owns the feeling he has for his city and the state. Now, whether you like him or you don't, or you feel like he shouldn't be.
I also feel like that ad had some passion. It had a movement.
Because it gets you here. It goes back to that, right? It's about, like, when you ask Nicole, how does she deal with people or members? I'll tell you how I do them. Sometimes I handhold and I babysit, and sometimes I tell them to grow up. Okay, it depends. It depends on the person. It depends on the circumstance.
So are you backing any candidates, either of you backing anyone for governor?
Not right now. Whoever wins the primary will certainly support 100%.
Right.
What about this idea in both parties? You have a bunch of candidates who never held office before, have a lot of their own money. I'm thinking of Lamont. I'm thinking of Stefanowski, Stemmerman, of Sitnik, not as much. But like they feel that because they were so good at business, that would make them so good at government. And because they have so much money, they're going to be a stronger candidate in general. I watched Linda McMahon. I watched Tom Foley. I watched Lamont in 2010. I don't see that working. Do you think that's the smart strategy for your parties? Nicole's looking to you to answer, big sister.
I can answer too. I mean, and I'm sure Themis will say this similar thing. It depends on the individual. One of the issues with Tom Foley was you couldn't connect with him. You didn't feel like you were on his level.
I felt I could connect with Linda McMahon, and yet she went $50 million down the toilet in each campaign.
So it doesn't matter. It's the candidate. If you make that connection, and people can tell if you're being forced to say something and it's not coming from your heart, or it's very robotic, people are like, I just don't.
So that's one issue about anyone running. What about the issue of business people with no experience? And we see this in both parties. In Chicago, you got Pritzker against Rayner, both of them, just business background. Rick Scott in Florida. Do you think that
Charlie Baker?
Do you think these people are wrong that not serving in government makes you better at running government?
No, I don't believe that not serving in government makes you better. But on the converse, I don't believe that serving in government makes you better. I think, to Nicole's point, it's the person. So it is the connectivity issue. It's about feeling that somebody's genuine and sincere. It's about what skill sets you bring to the table. Now, in this race, let's just say on the Republican side, we have two, career politicians in Boughton and Herbst, and you have the other three who are business people.
Now, when did that become such an epithet? Career politician. What
I know. I can't believe I just said it.
What about lifelong public servant? I mean, going to a million meetings and not making a lot of money for it and getting spit on all the time.
Well, listen, I didn't say it in a negative way. I didn't. I didn't because
you're saying that's the way they're viewed, and that's the packaging.
I'm talking about. Okay, then let me just rephrase it. People that have spent most of their career in public service, in government, right, and people that have spent their career in the private sector. So that's we have a very big difference between the two. I don't think one is better than the other. I don't think that you are better suited to be in office, to take another office because you've been in office. I think there's certainly institutional knowledge that you wouldn't have when if you haven't been in government. But I think you can easily learn that if you surround yourself with the right people. I mean, it's about your staff. And it's about the people you surround yourself with.
Do you think the Republicans made a mistake not promoting Erin Stewart as a young woman who could get crossover votes and would liven up the ticket? Would you have rather seen her run for governor?
I will say this in regards to any candidate. We go back to, you asked me the question about being a woman, and, I don't want any woman to be promoted because they're a woman, but I just don't want any woman to be demoted or treated unfairly.
What was the deal? Some people say she just didn't work it hard enough. She didn't start early enough. Other people say the party would rather be ideologically pure in a primary than win the general election. Other people say a woman wasn't going to get as much chance to ascend, and other people said she just wasn't ready.
Well, I think it's probably a combination of all of it. I mean, I'm not going to represent what she was thinking or what she did or she didn't do. I will say, I mean, we talked about me if I had run. I mean, I think I certainly had a skill set, and I would have had as good a chance as anybody else. I don't think it had anything to do with being a woman. I just think back to the beginning. It's about the candidate. It's about how hard they work. It's about how they connect with people. It's about their ability to raise money. It's about a million things, but you have to have all those things, right? So I think that Stemmer and Stefanowski and Obsitnik, I think they have a great skill set that some of the other guys don't have, and I think vice versa.
Do you really think you can eliminate the income tax and get just tomorrow, say, half of our revenue in a $20 billion budget? Because we got $10 billion this year.
I don't.
Why are they saying that? I was surprised. I understand why someone's never been in government, but Boughton's had a balanced budgets and is running as sort of like the reasonable moderate. Why would he have done that?
Again, I'm not going to tell you why people do or not do things, but we see very silly things happen during elections. And I just happened to turn on the radio this morning, and I heard David Stemmerman, and he was asked a similar question. And like I said, I just happened to turn it on, and it was right at that moment. And he was asked that question, and he said, "Listen, do I believe that taxes need to be lowered? Yes, and I have a plan to lower them by, I don't know, whatever number he had overall, $3 million or whatever it was." He goes, "But I also have to be a realist. The amount of money that the income tax brings in yearly,
usually $9 billion because of the federal tax billion. Change. It was $10 billion this year.
Yep. There is no way, as somebody that has been in those budgets, the developing of the budgets, the arguing of the budgets, the defending of the budgets, in them 24/7 for the past couple of years, there is no way to find that money now. But what there is a way to do is you look at estate tax and Social Security tax and pension, you look at change of regulations, you look at changes to the tax code, you look at the big picture of things. This whole, I'm going to eliminate the income tax, that sounds great, but why don't you tell me how you're going to do it? Yeah. It's just not realistic to say I'm going to do this now. But what is realistic is to look at the entire picture and figure out where's the fraud, where's the waste, what things don't work anymore, what things do we not need, and back to prioritizing the money we have.
You're listening to Themis and Nicole Klarides, and you're Clarice Detria, did I say it right?
Klarides Detria, yes.
Detria. Sister Act at the State House of Representatives, the first time in Connecticut's history. We've got two sisters at the legislature legislating together, and they're here on Dateline New Haven. Dan Newmeyer says Themis Klarides is a great leader, effective state rep, bright future. And J.P. Sierzinski, and I'm sorry for shredding that name, Themis is doing a tremendous job leading the Connecticut House Republicans to majority. All right, so let me guess a quick round of some issues now.
Thank you, JP.
A round of a few.
I see Daniel Kogarud is listening. He's very involved.
Hey, Daniel.
State politics, Daniel.
Quick couple of issues.
Dan,
Themis, you've been in the news recently. You were on a special session to address the $10 million in bonding. The Malloy administration succeeded in getting approved for a study on adding electronic tolls to the state. The small issue I think you're saying is maybe that we don't have that kind of money, and we already kind of studied the issue, but you're also in a mega way against tolls, right?
Okay, you really want my blood pressure to go up, right? Okay, here's my answer to that question.
We got a few bouncy balls here, a little squeeze toys.
Oh, I need more than that.
Okay.
It's like steel I could get through right now. First of all, we've spent the past 7 or 8 years studying, analyzing, having consultants, having public hearing after public hearing, committee meeting after public hearing, discussion from the DOT commissioner studying other states to studying internally. And what we have come to, the proposals that the governor and the Democrats have given us after all of that, is 55 to 88 tolls in the state of Connecticut, which is the third smallest state in the country. People talk about oh, it works in New York and it works in Massachusetts. Do you know that from New York City to Niagara Falls, which is over 400 miles, if you drove that distance, you would only pay just under $20 for tolls. And these proposals that we've gotten from Greenwich to New Haven, which is just about 40 miles, would be almost $10.
Do you remember the old days when it was like the New Jersey Turnpike? You kept stopping every 10 minutes, but you wouldn't stop anymore because it'd be like an easy pass.
Right. But the point is, I am not mega against tolls just under any circumstance. But I will tell you that 55 to 88 tolls on every road in this state, which has been the proposals we've been given by the governor and the Democrats in the legislature for the past couple of years, is a non-starter.
So you just made a case for Governor Malloy's malign $10 million because you're saying we need to study it better to come up with a better plan.
No. What I'm going to say is, studying what? Consultants, analysis, looking at other states. They have studied it. And this is what they've come up with, 55 to 88 tolls. But, Paul, do you want to know why? If that doesn't show the state of Connecticut that the only reason they are pushing tolls so hard is because they cannot fiscally manage the state, they cannot responsibly manage the state, they want a revenue grab. And that's the problem.
Okay, so let's talk nuts and bolts.
Oh, and then the next thing is
what
when
about,
the governor...
why don't you say, in addition to no special session, here's my alternative for how to do tolls right. Here's my 15 spots on the main headlines.
Because I don't believe that we need them right now. I'm going to tell you why. First of all, when the governor was asked in the bond commission, if you watched it, what's the difference between this study?
No, you got me on the study. You got me in the study. The info's out there.
This one's comprehensive.
Okay, you got me on the study. Okay. But why aren't you coming out responsibly in opposition?
We did. We have come up with a responsible alternative. It's called Prioritize Progress. The House and Senate Republicans have put forth for the past 3 years a very responsible and comprehensive plan to fund the Special Transportation Fund without tolls and without gas tax increases. We have put it out.
How would you fund it?
It has been public. We decided, okay, remember the governor's proposal was $100 gazillion in transportation? I would think that was going to be the first person to stand next to him if we had $100 gazillion. The problem is we don't have $100 gazillion cents. Okay, we have a very serious problem. We had a $5 billion deficit.
Right, so how would you fund
it's going to get worse. So what we
transit?
decided was we have to prioritize the money we have. And when you have to prioritize that money, what's the first thing you go to? Safety. There are almost 20% of roads and bridges in this state that are precariously unsafe.
And how would you fund those repairs?
We put out $63 billion for the next 30 years in bonding money.
So that's more borrowing. You don't like borrowing.
But it's borrowing in a responsible way. We never said you should never borrow again. But
so
it's what you're borrowing for.
Because that's what I see a lot on the borrowing agenda.
He wanted to borrow $10 million to do another study. This is actually investing in our roads and bridges, investing in projects we can afford. Paul, everybody wants investment in transportation, Republican, Democrat, no matter where you're from. But we have to do it in an affordable way because this bonding has put us in this position, part of the position we're in.
So just someone standing on the outside, a little editorial comment. One place I've always disagreed with Republicans and Democrats is this whole idea of special funds and lock boxes. I thought that was an excuse for not taking the big boy steps of making decisions as a legislator, how to do priorities every year with the general fund.
Well, I'll tell you what my problem now that you brought up lockbox is. We've been going through that for the past couple of years because, to have a constitutional amendment, it's got to pass the legislature by simple majority, 2 in a row or one. There's all these parameters. So there will be a question on the ballot this November. And here's our problem. The lockbox definition that will be on the ballot has a nice shiny lock in the front, but holes in the back. Yeah. And the difference between what our proposal was for a lockbox, basically saying the money goes in, stays in, that's it. What they have was, if the money goes in, so let's just use an example of tolls and gas tax. Let's say we identify tolls and gas tax as money that goes into the lockbox. Once it goes in, it stays in. But the glitch is that money can be manipulated before it goes in. So they can determine next year that, we're not going to use gas tax anymore. So that would mean gas tax or tolls, which they will swear on a stack of Bibles that toll money will go to Special Transportation Fund, could go somewhere else.
All right, and JP writes in, don't forget about Nicole. She's very talented, has already accomplished a great deal, and that's true. And
okay, I'll stop talking.
No, I'm not asking you to stop talking at all. Thank you for talking,
Nicole. We never forget about Nicole.
Big JP, what are some of the other accomplishments you had your first term in addition to the athletic trainer?
We worked on some animal bills, some shelter bills that strengthened the shelters in Connecticut that they need. Themis, help me with this. The shelter bill.
Nicole and I ended up at a shelter in Monroe a few years ago, and it was a day just like this, very hot and humid, because I was wanting to adopt a kitten because my cat had passed away, and we walked there, and it's just these dogs they're all outside, and they're lethargic, and they're not being treated well. We
And the
go
conditions
inside were worse.
awful.
So we went to Department of Agriculture. We went to Representative Kupchak, who's been a huge animal advocate for many years. We went to Representative Straczynski, who represents Monroe, first selectman of Averick at the time, and we said, what's going on here? And long story short, the guy who owned it, at that moment, he wasn't at the shelter. He was on trial being sentenced in Milford for animal cruelty all over the state.
So what does your bill do?
It puts more parameters on who can open these and what you need to do to
Was
have
this co-sponsored,
and the
Klarides?
It was.
Yeah.
Was it your only bill co-sponsored?
No.
We had
What else
a lot
did
of
you co-sponsor?
veterans bills.
Veterans bill to expand the limits for tax breaks for veterans. That was another one. I think we co-sponsored some opioid.
Mhm.
We had a handful, probably maybe around 10 or so, that we did co-sponsor.
So you can still get along.
Yeah.
You both agree? You're both against legalizing recreational use of marijuana?
I am.
I
know how
am.
you are.
I can't. Being a healthcare professional, I can't.
So funny. I'm militantly for it, even though I haven't smoked marijuana in like 30 years, and I really don't want my kids to. Isn't that kind of funny? Like I believe there are arguments for it, but deep down,
Right.
you'd
I
rather
never
people were
have.
against them.
I never have. But I don't feel at this time. Let the other states be our guinea pig, and we can learn from Colorado and the negatives from that. And again, like we constantly say, it's another money grab. We don't need to do that right now.
$15 hourly minimum wage.
Well, can I just go back to the marijuana for a quick second? We're now seeing some of the results of legalized marijuana in other states. When you look, property values are going down. There's crime issues. There are things that, once again, you don't anticipate things sometimes, and you have to let things play out on their own. And there are members of the legislature that were supportive of it, that now we have seen them read these studies and read these reports that are now saying, maybe this isn't a great idea.
$15 million, because we're running at $15 hourly minimum wage. Wouldn't that be something that your blue collar base might want in the Valley?
Right, but here's what concerns me. Once again, for every action, there's a reaction. And so a lot of these ideas are wonderful ideas when you think of them in a box. But unfortunately, we have to look at the other side of the coin. And there are people, whether it is paid sick leave, whether it is minimum wage, whether it's any of these things, that will actually hire less people if they have to pay certain things
That's been
more.
debated by a lot of studies over
It
the
has
years.
been debated, and there's both sides, and I get it, and it's something that's certainly a conversation we should continue to have. But that's what will happen.
And I've loved this conversation. I wish we had another hour. It's been so nice to meet Nicole Klarides Dietrich.
Yes. Thank you so
and
much
have
for
Themis
having me.
Klarides back. The sister team, the sister act on the road in Hartford. I didn't realize 10 bills together. You didn't beat each other up, it sounds like.
Not yet.
You made
We have time.
unscathed.
We
have a whole election to go through.
And I will give one lesson to Nicole from watching Themis in this interview, something you can learn from your sister. She's really good on social media. And while the show was on, she was responding to people who were posting comments.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is a mark of a successful 21st century politician. So if you're going to stay in the business, that's something you can learn from your sister.
Thank you.
And next time you come, we're going to have you talk more.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for
Thanks,
having
Paul.
me.
It's great.
Thanks so much for coming, and thanks for listening, everyone. Thanks to Yale New Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. And it was really great hanging out with Themis and Nicole Klarides Dietrich. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience, performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. Now, we know what it's like to be free. Just got to remember to book our flight. Fly free with us all day and all night long here at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.